get started, is that okay? I know that President Janey, Counselor, Jesus Lord, I gonna get this right before my term is done. President Counsel Janey is here. So Council President Janey is here. So I want to make sure that we take advantage of this time and get things going. So I am going to get started. And if we're good, we're live and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna make the screen bigger. Even with my glasses, I still can't see y'all. Hold up. Okay. So I'm gobbling us in with my iPhone. I'm calling this hearing to an order. Good afternoon, everyone. I am City Councilor at Large, Julia Mejia, the chair on the Committee of Civil Rights. It is Thursday, December the 10th, 2020, and we are here today for a virtual hearing on docket 0230, order for a hearing regarding civil rights and the creation of sanctuary safe spaces in Boston. This matter was sponsored by myself and was referred to the committee on January the 15th, 2020. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meeting in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health accommodations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate and alternative means. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city/council-TV. It will be rebroadcasted on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Files Channel 964. If you wish to testify, please email shane.pac@boston.gov to sign up. And there's still time, so make sure you make it happen. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation, residency, and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.civilrights@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all counselors. Recognizing counselors in the order of arrival, I'm joined today by Council President Janey of District 7, Councilor Ed Flynn of District 2, Councilor Michelle Wu at Large, Councilor Elizabeth Breeden, District 9, and Councilor Campbell, District 4. Wow, thank you guys for coming. That's great. So our expected speakers today include the administration, Yusufi Valley, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, Sam DePina, Chief Operation Officer for the Boston Public Schools. I did see Chief Coakley, so I'm not sure if she's going to be joining us, but I did see her in the room. So if she's going to speak, we're going to create space for you as well. And then we also have our advocates, Laura Rotolo, a staff counsel and community advocate at ACLU of Massachusetts, Emily Langu, a supervising attorney of Immigrant Unit Justice Center for Southeast Massachusetts, Yvonne Espinosa Magardi, who's the Executive Director of the Lawyers for Civil Rights, and Valeria Del Valle, who's the Director of the Student Immigrant Movement. I'd like to begin with a brief opening statement. Good Lord, it's gonna be brief, y'all. Don't worry, we're gonna get through all of this. And the thing is that my internet is unstable, so I hope I'm still even on Zoom. Let me just go check. Am I still here?
Yeah. We see you, we can hear you.
Okay, because I don't have the Zoom screen. I just have my doc here, so I'm like probably talking to myself. Okay, this hearing means so much to me because it's incredibly personal. But this hearing isn't about me. Decades ago, I was growing up in Boston with a mother who was undocumented for a period of time. But even before today, There are hundreds, if not thousands, of little kids like me going through the same thing, experiencing the same fears, wondering if their mom or dad or brother or sister is going to come home at night. We've been having the same conversation for far too long. And it feels like no matter how many times the Trust Act or anti-surveillance bills we pass, ICE still shows up on our streets to harass our people, and it has to stop. Now, I'm not going to pretend that we're going to fix ICE in a 2 or 3 hour hearing conversation, but we've got to do something. So during this hearing, I'm going to be focusing my attention on looking at what we've done in the past and looking at what is working and what is not. I plan to continue this conversation with each and every one of you throughout the break and into the new year, so that in 2021, we can put something on the books that puts to rest the attacks and the harassment and the intimidation that undocumented residents face every day here in the city of Boston. So for many of you who may or may not know, this was also my maiden speech, and it's an issue that is deeply personal to me. So I'm so incredibly grateful that I have a platform to be able to utilize my voice to create space for others. So thank you so much for those who are here with us today. And I'd like to give my colleagues an opportunity for any opening statements. And I'm going to go to President Council Janey first.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Many thanks to you. And certainly I want to acknowledge and thank Chief Coakley, Chief DePina, Chief Valley from the administration, certainly our panel of advocates and activists. It is great to be in space with you today. I wanted to make sure I was here. I can't stay for the entire time, Madam Chair, but I knew this was very important to you as your maiden speech, and it is very important to me in the city of Boston. Our history in this country, as you know, as people on this call know, is one of who is legitimate, who belongs, and who doesn't. And that still plays out to this day, especially with the current administration. Now more than ever, it is important that we create sanctuary spaces and safe spaces for everyone in community. Just ordinary things like registering for school, trying to take a COVID test, applying for housing, all of those things can be very intimidating for someone who was not born on this land, and particularly if their papers, if they're undocumented. And so it is really important that we do everything we can. And if there is an action that will come from this, I hope you consider me a partner in this work with you. So again, many thanks. I will stay on as long as I can and hope to have a very productive hearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Councillor Ed Flynn, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia, and like Council President Janey mentioned, I'm also proud to be with our colleagues, but especially with you today, as this was your maiden speech, and so I know it's an important issue for you, for our body, and for the city. So it's good to be with you, Councilor Mejia. Thank you for sponsoring this hearing. Thank you for your continued advocacy for our immigrant neighbors. Immigrant neighbors are an integral part of our city and country, and we should do what we can to protect the rights of our immigrant neighbors and make sure they feel safe and protected in our city, in our country. We are a nation and city of immigrants. I'm proud of the immigrant roots we have here in Boston, and every time I walk into this building, I'm reminded of the immigrant memorial outside of City Hall that was placed there by Mayor Flynn a while back. I'm proud to represent a large number of immigrants in my district. I know the contribution immigrants play, and they need to be included and engaged in our city. And just on a personal level, when I had the opportunity to get elected to the city council 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to hire 5 people on my staff, and I wanted to try to get the best people I possibly could. And the best people I possibly could get out of the 5 people on my staff, 4 of them are immigrants, the women of color and the immigrants. And I could not do this job effectively without their input, without their advice, without listening to them and talking about their life experiences of how they grew up, because I didn't grow up like that, but like a city council, we're always learning. And the more we learn about immigrant roots, the better we are as a city and as a government. So I just wanted to highlight that personal fact because our staff, but diversity is a critical part of being an elected official, because when you surround yourself by immigrants, you have a better opportunity to learn about your district and your city and the struggles of people. And when you learn about the struggles of people, you can focus on issues that are of concern to them, not of what's concerning to you. So I just wanted to highlight that personal issue. But again, thank you to Councilor Mejia, and it's good to see Councilor Braden as well, who's an immigrant that has also made tremendous contributions to our city and country. So having said that, I want to welcome the panelists as well, and especially my good friend Yusuf, who I see there, who does a terrific job working for Mayor Walsh. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. I'm going to move on to at-large Councilor Michelle Wu. You now have the floor.
So much, Madam Chair. I, like the others, wanted to just echo how powerful your speech was, and it just feels like ages ago when we were all in person in the council chamber, and now especially as this crisis has worsened and worsened and along so many dimensions, focus on our immigrant communities and on making sure we are creating safe community buildings, spaces, and every action we can as a city is that much more important. So just wanted to thank you for your leadership and thank everyone for being part of this, and to our many advocates, especially for all you've been doing to hold up our communities in this time of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Councilor Breeden. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations. This is your the hearing order that you called in your maiden speech. It is such a vitally important subject for us to address, to make our city safer for all of our residents, regardless of where they come from, or what language they speak, or what color their skin. It's such a very, very important subject, and I look forward to the discussion this afternoon, and thank you for raising this up and being such a strong advocate for immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And my last colleague, Councilor Campbell from District 4, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your thoughts and your story, right? You're an example in this moment of representation matters, right? Your opening remarks and maiden speech, we were all in person, was emotional, it was powerful, it was passionate. So of course, wanted to be here to support you. I will tell you, this hearing is going to be a painful one, right? Just listening to your story, but we know that ICE is still out there. We're constantly getting calls and emails and just text messages, just devastating things from our residents in the city of Boston around some of these very unfortunate, traumatic and painful moments. And it's not just traumatic and painful for the individual, of course, it also is for their family and for the community. And so I'm absolutely looking forward to this hearing to see how we can build upon the Trust Act and the previous work of counselors that were here before I got to the council with respect to these issues, and expanding upon specifically what we can do in terms of creating more sanctuary spaces. So folks always have a place to go. I also want, of course, thank the advocates, all of the panelists who are here, and of course those from the administration, as we think about these critical issues, and of course look to work in partnership. And lastly, I will say, before I got on the hearing, I was taking me back to the chamber in which you stood up and gave your maiden speech, and all of us, of course, applauded. But the thing that you lift up all the time in these conversations around issues related to immigration are those we label as undocumented. And I think that's critically important because we sometimes separate, even in the immigration space and conversation, who deserves what benefits, who deserves access, who should be at the table, who should be included, and much of that often has a political layer. And you lift it up in such a way to say, everybody, all means all, right? And so I think it's critically important that we do away with some of the labeling, including undocumented. If they live in the city of Boston and are residents here in the city of Boston and choose our great city to live in and be a part of, then it's our responsibility to work in partnership with them to give them all the supports they need and all the opportunities they deserve. So I just wanted to stress that point. Thank you again for your leadership. And thank you to everyone on the panel today.
Thank you. Thank you so very much to my colleagues, to the panelists, and to the advocates for being here with us today. I will be checking to see if we have public testimony throughout the hearing so that we can prioritize their voice. You know, I always like to lead with the people who are living these realities. So Shane will let us know once we have people who are here to testify. And we'll ask you to introduce yourself and to keep your comments to 2 minutes. As of right now, I don't think we have anyone here for testimony. So we do have some time constraints. So I'm going to ask those folks to begin with the time so that we have time for questions. So we're going to start with Emily, followed by Yusufi, and then Sam. And then we'll pause for questions from the counselors. So I'm going to ask Emily, and I think we're going to do a timer so that we can get through this. So let's go. Emily, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Congratulations, Councilor Mejia, on your maiden speech. Thank you for the invitation to speak on these important issues. My name is Emily Lung. I'm the supervising immigration attorney at the Justice Center of Southeast Massachusetts. I've had the privilege of working in and around the greater Boston area and in the Commonwealth as an immigration attorney for over 12 years in a variety of roles, but primarily working with nonprofits, working with indigent, low-income individuals and families. And it's been my great honor to do this work, even during these very, very difficult times. I know our time is short, so I just kind of want to say that the last 4 years have been an incredibly difficult time for immigrant communities, and that's not to diminish the fact that it is generally difficult, in particular, to be an undocumented immigrant in America. And I don't want us to think that while there are brighter skies on the horizon, that there is not still work that needs to be done. A lot of the damage that was inflicted during these last 4 years will not be able to be reversed at the drop of a hat and will take time and maybe years to even get back to the place that we used to be. And I think in some ways, what we've seen over these last 4 years is really just how critical a role localities and states play in providing a protective environment for immigrant communities, especially when you have such a hostile federal administration. And so I really just want to make that point that it is not our time right now to sit back and say, well, you know, things are changing, things are getting better on the federal side, so we don't need to do work on the state and local level. I think if anything, what we've seen in the last 4 years is just how important it is that we do that work. And so I am very grateful that the City Council has been doing so much work in this area, but I do think that there are still gaps, and we've seen those gaps be exploited in particular during these last few years. I just want to spend time on 3 quick examples, and I know that my other colleagues will also spend more time on these issues as well. But for example, we know that these are well publicized examples, so I think they're good ones. The case of the immigrant worker, where we had the joint task force between BPD and ICE that led to that person's arrest and detention by immigration. That was in 2017. We have the students who have been deported because of the BPS school reports that were not alleging any criminal activity. We also have a lot of other immigrants and immigrant youth who have had have had deportation cases brought against them or have had their immigration cases denied because of field investigative operational reports made by Boston Police Department. So I have been working with a lot of other individuals and a lot of wonderful coalitions and organizers and other legal services groups to try to uncover, and with City Council, to try to uncover all these different interlocking things. These different task force, how the gang database and the Boston Regional Intelligence Center operates, what is the Boston Public School policies regarding information sharing. And I think that we have a large web of interconnecting agencies, and we still have not yet figured out where all the holes are and how to plug those holes. And so I would really like to see that be the work of the future and the work of the coming year, to just really get down to where those gaps are and start to make sure that our policies are really covering those. And I think that this past year has really shown us, COVID has really shown us the extreme vulnerabilities, particularly of the immigrant community, because they represent a really large share of frontline workers and essential workers, yet they are left out entirely from any sort of minimal federal assistance that has existed. And once again, what COVID has shown us is that we are only as strong as we are all together. COVID doesn't care if you're undocumented, doesn't care if you're a citizen, if you're old or young, it can be spread between everyone in the community. And so we need to protect and lift up everyone in Boston. I think COVID shows us that. This last 4 years under this administration has shown us that. And I think as a city, I really appreciate the City Council has been digging in on a lot of these tough issues, but I think we need to keep pushing forward and not step back just because the federal administration might become a little bit more helpful in the next few years. There's still a lot of work that we can do. And I really look forward to working together with City Council and working with all the folks I've been able to work with to continue to push these issues. I'm really grateful to Councilor Mejia for continuing to raise this issue up, and all the other councilors that we've worked closely with on the BRIC, on the public schools issues. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to note that my internet is unstable and I may have to disappear, and I will have to ask one of my colleagues to step in and facilitate if I shall disappear or if I freeze. So Emily, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to working with you in partnership. And you finished under time, so good job. Okay, that's enough. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I wanted to just also note that we did extend an invitation to BPD, which is the Boston Police Department, but they were not able to attend. They did send this letter, and I think I'm gonna read it into the record, just because I feel it's important for, even though they weren't here, but they should be heard. The Boston Police Department is committed to protecting the civil rights of all residents and visitors to the city of Boston, and we are committed to working in partnership with all communities to ensure public safety and equal access to service and services and supports. The BPD Civil Rights Unit is focused on investigating potential violations of civil rights. Through our proactive community policing model, we work with residents and community leaders in all of our neighborhoods to address concerns, solve problems, and connect those in need with resources and opportunities. The Bureau of Community Engagement, our district community service officers, and many other divisions and units run programs, events, and activities to support our most vulnerable at-risk youth and families, as well as victims of crime. Many of these efforts are focused on reaching immigrant communities. For example, in Dorchester, we have civilian liaisons and community service officers for the Vietnamese and Cape Verdean communities. The Bureau of Investigation Services detectives assist victims and witnesses in the process of applying for U visas. Many of these cases involve victims and witnesses of serious violent crimes such as sexual assault, domestic violence, and aggravated assault. We are very aware of concerns that immigrants and immigrant communities may have regarding law enforcement, particularly those who may be undocumented. We have worked very closely with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, the Boston City Council, Boston Public Schools, and other city agencies in the creation and implementation of the Trust Act. We look forward to continuing this critical and important work with our city partners and in partnership with the community. Thank you. So that was great. Thank you so much. It would be great to get the BPD in the room for future discussions, because I feel like we still have so much more questions, but do appreciate the letter nonetheless. There is a voice here, and it's welcomed and appreciated, and looking forward to working with you as well. Anyway, Yusufi, you now have the floor.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Councilor Mejia, and congratulations on this hearing and pulling off your maiden speech here. Thank you to all the councilors for prioritizing Boston's immigrants and providing me the opportunity to address this esteemed body. I also want to thank the many advocates here today. Mayor Walsh and all of us have been working together tirelessly over the years, and even in those instances where we didn't have complete agreement on a particular issue, we all came to the table dedicated to doing our best to serve our immigrant communities, and we're grateful for your dedication and tenacity. Our city is a better place for all the conversations we've had, which led to truly historic actions of which we can all be proud of. I also really want to thank my colleague Sam DePina, Chief Operating Officer at Boston Public Schools, for his partnership in working towards making our schools safe and welcoming to all. My name is Yusufi Vali, and I serve as the Director of the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement. To all the attendees of this hearing, please know that the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement is here to support and to advocate for all of our city's diverse immigrant residents. Under Mayor Walsh's leadership and partnerships with our city departments, as well as with you all in this room, we're making sure our residents, whether born here or somewhere else, feel safe and have opportunities to make a life for themselves here in Boston. I want to begin my remarks with our values, who we are as a city. From day one, Mayor Walsh and our team here at the city have been clear. To be a Bostonian means to take care of one another, to stand by one another, and to work together across our differences for the common good of our city and all residents. That, of course, includes our immigrant residents, regardless of status. The mayor and our team have done our utmost to adhere to these values and put them into practice, while at the same time learning along the way, persevering in the dogged and difficult work, often with many of you present here today, of removing the inequitable ghosts of the past in many of our systems, and recognizing that there is always more to do. Allow me to provide some examples of how we have put our values into action. From the moment election results for the 2016 US presidential election became clear, Mayor Walsh and our team have been on the front lines of fighting back against the demonizing rhetoric and countless anti-immigrant policies from the Trump administration. Each of you will recall that right off the bat, our mayor was the first in the nation to proclaim any immigrant who does not feel safe can be housed in City Hall. We have, as a last resort, we have backed that rhetoric with countless amicus briefs, public comments, and advocacy efforts to oppose the federal government's attacks on DACA recipients, TPS holders, families seeking asylum, applicants for citizenship, refugees, people from Muslim majority countries, low-income applicants for visas, and participation in the US Census over the past 4 years. I'm hopeful the demonization of immigrants will change with the incoming Biden administration, and my office is working on ways to help shape the federal agenda, though I agree with Emily, we can't take anything for granted. Meanwhile, in addition to the above, under the mayor's leadership, we as a city have been focused on things we can control through the power of local government. The mayor has invested in programs and services to make sure immigrants aren't just safe, but able to thrive regardless of immigration status. I'll just name a couple of programs because I could go through a litany. Because there is no mandate to provide defense lawyers in immigration court, many immigrants are unable to afford lawyers and face one of the most consequential situations of their lives alone. Without legal representation, they themselves must make their case before a judge why they should be allowed to remain in the US with their families, their children. As a result, in 2017, Mayor Walsh took the courageous step to work with our foundation partners to launch the $1 million Greater Boston Immigrant Legal Defense Fund and made the city of Boston the first New England city to contribute public dollars for this fund in 2018. This fund is continued in year 3 and year 4. And this year, we have doubled our investment into the Greater Boston Immigrant Legal Defense Fund from $50,000 to $100,000. I hope the advocates at this hearing will push surrounding towns and the state to do the same. The fund increases our capacity to protect and defend immigrant and refugee communities by increasing access to 1, legal representation for individuals facing deportation proceedings in immigration court who cannot afford a lawyer, and 2, community education and preparedness programming such as Know Your Rights trainings, legal screenings, and referrals, among other activities. In its first 2 years, the fund allowed legal aid organizations to hire 6 additional immigration attorneys and community organizations to hire 8 additional advocates to serve immigrants in our communities free of charge. Just another example I'll give is another important initiative that the mayor and my team launched this summer was our Dreamers Fellowship Program. Our immigrant youth, regardless of status, need to have the same kind of job opportunities as their native-born peers. This summer, we started an unprecedented pilot program that paired 50 Dreamers with nonprofits to gain hands-on work experience and education while receiving a stipend. Am I seeing my time's almost up, Counselor? Okay, just give me a minute. So these are the kind of programs that we were engaged in. I do want to just comment on sanctuary. As we consider the creation of sanctuary safe spaces for purposes of transparency for the public, I'd like to just remark on this term. There is no legal definition of a sanctuary city, nor an agreed upon definition. But the term has been so weaponized that much of the public, both on the right and the left, think a sanctuary city is a city where ICE cannot enter and operate. This is not accurate, and this is neither practical nor within the purview of local city government. Just as we cannot stop any individual from coming into the city, we cannot stop ICE agents from entering the city. The continual use of the term sanctuary may be counterproductive to the goal of keeping our immigrant residents safe because it could create false impressions. And I think clarity for our immigrants is so important during this time, because clarity is what allows them to really understand what their rights are and not. Now, the city of Boston has never been self-identified as a sanctuary city. However, many media outlets, political observers, and pro-immigrant and anti-immigrant advocacy groups have labeled Boston a sanctuary city because of our local laws, policies, and practices to protect immigrants and make sure all residents feel safe. The Trust Act is an example of that. I'm happy to get into that later if you like. And in regards to limiting access to physical spaces, my colleague Samuel DePina from Boston Public Schools can talk about what the schools have done to ensure that students have healthy learning environments. Counselors, thank you so much for your time today. And I'd like to thank you again for keeping Boston's immigrants in your minds and hearts. I'm looking forward to working with all of you, community leaders and our residents themselves, about how to make everyone feel safe and welcomed in Boston. I believe we're on the right track and doing powerful things, impactful things that I'm eager to see develop in the short and long term. I do believe that Boston is one of the more safe and welcoming cities across America. If you step right out of Boston, you're not going to see some of those same policies. Boston has passed the Trust Act, but we do need to pass the Safe Communities Act of the state, so that there is uniformity in policies across police departments. I'll end with that, Counselor, and I could speak more to the programs and I can get into the Trust Act if needed, but I'll leave my comments at this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sweetie. Thank you so much. In the interest of like shaking things up, because anybody who comes to my hearings, you're gonna have a little bit of fun. So I was gonna go to someone else from the administration next, but I think it's important for us to balance this out a little bit, because I would love to give Yvonne an opportunity now to speak. I know you were prepared to speak later on, but I just think in the interest of keeping the conversation going, I think it would be great if Yvonne, you can go next.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here this evening with you and your colleagues. Always wonderful to be in such distinguished company. City Councillor Ed Flynn, Andra Campo, Michelle Wu, Liz Brereton, among others. It is always a pleasure to see you, Councillor Kim Janey, as well, and to hear all of your powerful remarks at the onset of this important hearing. And thank you for the opportunity to go next. I appreciate it. I fully agree with much of what has been said by my colleague and friend, Jasufi Valley, who does an incredible job in immigrant affairs. It is absolutely true that the city cannot stop ICE immigration officials from coming into the city. And so I want to make that very clear. And the city's position that maybe the nomenclature, the way that this is, the public messaging may have to be adjusted, is an interesting and potentially useful suggestion. But I would give some pushback. I would say that the city has some control. It might not be able to control federal immigration officials, but it certainly can control its own employees. And by this, I am referring to some of the testimony that we heard from my colleague, Emily Leung, who identified, for example, that there have been deportations of students from East Boston High School. To be clear, this isn't happening right now, but it certainly has happened recently. And it wasn't immigration officials going into East Boston High School. To be very clear, it was city employees, school resource officers, to be precise, people who work for the city, people who get paid with our taxpayer dollars, and who report to city officials, who turned over student records to immigration officials via the Boston Police and the Fusion Intelligence Center, the BRIC. And so I would submit to this distinguished body that even though there are limitations to what the city can do, it can certainly hold all city officials to a very high standard, a standard that means not just alignment with the values that have been expressed here, but with the practical realities of protecting families. And so for us at Lawyers for Civil Rights, which I have the honor of leading as executive director, we've been working on these issues with many members of this distinguished body and with many community partners. And for us, it really isn't about should we keep immigration out of the city. Those are issues beyond our control, as has been identified. But it really is about how do we make sure that city officials do not have these loopholes available to go around the Trust Act and the values of the city. And so that means that all city agencies, and by here I mean not just the Boston Police Department or the Boston Public Schools, but all city agencies should all be on the same page about making sure that immigration status is irrelevant for access to municipal services. That's number one. And number two, that any collusion with federal immigration officials is not just frowned upon. This can't just be a slap on the wrist. It has to have real consequences as a breach of the commitments that this city has made to its residents and taxpayers. And so I respectfully submit that we still have work to do, which is why I commend you, Councillor Mejia, for convening us this afternoon to speak about the work that remains to be done. We can applaud this city and all it has accomplished while still keeping a very firm eye towards how we can make the city even more welcoming, even more protective to immigrant families. I am happy to answer any questions that you or your colleagues may have, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I love this rich dialogue because it gives us an opportunity to identify the bright spots and also the areas of growth, right? And I think that if we can, I wholeheartedly believe that everyone who's participating in this conversation knows that we're working towards getting to some place where all of our people can feel safe. And so I think that that is a commitment that we all have, and I'm so incredibly grateful for the dialogue that is happening here. So in the interest of going, I switched it up a little bit. So now I'm gonna give Chief DePina an opportunity. And I know that Chief Coakley is with us as well from the Boston Public Schools, as well as the operations, the Boston Public School Police, as well as the operations. So Chief Coakley and Chief DePina, I'm not sure which of you are interested in kind of answering in many ways, kind of like giving your opportunity now to hear, having heard from Emily and having heard from Yvonne and Yusufi, would love for you to continue to build, and let's follow the string of the thread that we're talking about in terms of the information sharing, and in terms of the fact that regardless of all of the things that we have done, it seems that there's so much more that we can be doing. And that's what I'd like to hear a little bit more about from our next speakers on behalf of Boston Public Schools.
Sure.
Chief DePina?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for gathering us here today and for taking on and keeping this issue at the forefront for the city. So just want to thank you openly and publicly for that. I also want to thank and acknowledge all the other members here this evening, the other city council members, panelists, and the public at large who has taken this hearing in. Immigration is very near and dear to my heart as a Calvillian man, and I've witnessed firsthand the trials and tribulations of immigration and deportation, in my community. And as a BPS employee, I can also say that it's very near and dear to a lot of the staff and leadership at Boston Public Schools, including Dr. Caselius. And we are constantly eager to help and work with anyone who is willing to help improve and keep our kids safe as possible. So I acknowledge and welcome that opportunity and look forward to further dialogue. I also want to thank and acknowledge all of our city partners, including Yusufi and the Boston Police and Boston Center Youth and Families and all other city agencies who also take this issue very seriously and work very hard to keep our citizens safe, and always will look for ways to do better. So we're here and are eager to be part of that conversation. The Boston Public Schools acknowledge that we welcome anyone who comes to our doors to get an education, regardless of their immigration status. We want all immigrants to know that whatever their legal status, they're beloved members of our community, and we'll continue to welcome them and support them and honor their constitutional right for free and uninterrupted public education. BPS is committed to providing safe, open, and inviting spaces for learning for all of our students, including immigrant students, and we have incorporated this commitment into some of our existing policies. We're glad and always willing to improve and strengthen these policies, and we welcome that opportunity. But right now, just for the record, we do not require or ask any student or parent to provide or confirm immigration or citizenship status. We continue to translate all of our communications in our 9 major languages to ensure that there's communication between families. We recently strengthened our information sharing policies by creating a policy that governs the sharing of student incident reports with law enforcement, as well as restricting the types of information we deem as directory information that can be shared without parent consent. And those few things that can be shared without parent consent are student's name, age, grade, and dates of enrollment, and that's it. A student's address, date of birth, neighborhood of residence, and school name are not shared without parental consent. So again, we do not share any of that information. BPS has a specific policy entitled Superintendent Circular 8 called Education Access for All, and that governs access to students by federal immigration officials. Under that policy, we set specific protocols that must be followed if law enforcement officials appear at any school and seeks to access a student. While we don't anticipate that this will happen, we have to be prepared in the event it does as a precaution. And we feel it is important just because you never know. And we want to just ensure that there's procedures in place for our school administration to follow. So there's no confusion about what to do in that event and no one's surprised by it. And we train our administration on the policy as well. So we're constantly reminding them of what to do in this regard. Just to briefly go over the steps, no official is granted access to the school at all. School administrator must request identification from the person that visits the school, and then inform our safety services department or Boston Police for further assistance. Whether or not a school official, whether or not the official presents with a warrant or not, the official is informed by the school administrator that all requests for students must go through our central office and is directed to the Department of Safety Services in our legal office. If the official appears with a warrant, the warrant is presented to the BPS Office of Legal Advisor to review and ensure its validity, and issues a judicial warrant. Consistent with the Trust Act, we will not allow access to a student with an administratively issued warrant or warrant not issued by a magistrate or judge. Our Office of Safety Services, or BPD, will take the lead in facilitating access to the student, but only if required by law and so instructed by the BPS Office of Legal Advisor. The Superintendent's Office is also notified, and the BPS Communications Health and Wellness Department is also notified. If the official appears without a warrant, the same process followed, and the school official or Department of Safety Services notifies the family. In this instance, no access to the student is granted unless there's parental consent. So again, we don't allow access, but if the parent agrees otherwise, then we'll proceed appropriately. But our first position is not to allow access. If the official does not abide by the protocol, the school administration is instructed not to interact with the official any further, and to wait for Safety Services of Boston Police to arrive to respond further to the request. So again, these are steps that we currently take, and to your point, Councilor Mejia, any way we can strengthen them, we're glad to engage in a dialogue to see how we can do that, and we welcome the opportunity. Thank you.
Your time was up, but I let you live a little bit longer. Okay, so I think, I know I have my colleagues who are waiting to ask questions. I think it's important for us. I know Chief Coakley, you're here with us too. I am curious, in terms of timing, I'd like to have one more advocate kind of speak and kind of respond just to what they've heard recently from Sam, and then move to you. Is that okay? Will you still be able to be with us?
Listen today. I'm here to support Sam and our mission over at BPS. I'm just honored to be in the room. Hello to all the counselors, and special thanks to Council President Janey and yourself for really leading this challenge. And we just really appreciate being in the room and having the opportunity to be heard and to also listen. And I adhere to everything that Chief DePina spoke to, and we're willing to be a continued partner in this challenge.
Thank you, Chief Coakley. I'm glad that you're here. It means the world to us and to those that we serve. So thank you for being engaged in the conversation. I am going to then, with that said, because this is a conversation, they should not call it, it's a hearing, but sometimes it sounds so formal, which it is, but this is really an opportunity for us to convene as a collective. So I think it would be helpful if we can hear now from Laura Rotolio, and I got glasses and I should be embarrassed because I can't even read, but I know it says Staff Counsel and Community Advocate for ACLU. I'm just curious if you are prepared to speak now. It would be incredibly helpful to just hear some of your reflections and remarks, especially to the things that you've just recently heard. And then I am going to move on to my colleagues for questions.
Sure, yes, I could definitely speak. Thank you so much. And thank you, Councilor Mejia, for pulling us together today, for having this amazing hearing. And just want to congratulate you, as everyone else has done, for your maiden speech. And it speaks volumes that from the moment Councilor Mejia took office, this was the very first issue that she focused on, making the city safe and welcoming for immigrants. It means a lot to the community. And I think from the very beginning, Councilor Mejia has challenged us to really think outside the box, to revisit existing policies, and to give new life to promises that have been made by the city. So I just want to be thankful for that. I want to say a few things. My colleagues Emily and Yusufi have already spoken about this, but I think it bears repeating. the issues that we are discussing here will not go away under a Biden administration. While candidate Biden has made a lot of statements, pro-immigrant promises about rolling back harmful Trump policies, none of those campaign promises really get to the heart of what we're talking about here, which is the collaboration between cities and ICE. And I want to remind us all that it was under the Obama administration that this was really ramped up, that the sharing of information and the reliance on cities as a key part of the sort of local to deportation pipeline, that was really ramped up under a Democratic administration with Biden as vice president. So we do not expect that that is going to go away. You know, deportations are not going to stop. ICE is still going to exist unless we are successful in defunding it, but that has not been the focus of the Biden campaign. So we do expect deportations to continue, and we do expect the federal government to continue to rely on cities for information and help. And I just wanted to focus a little bit on the Trust Act that we touched on. In terms of the history, you know, in 2014, this council passed the Boston Trust Act for the very first time. It was a groundbreaking ordinance then. It prohibited the city from holding persons on ICE detainers, which was a practice that was widespread before it was struck down as illegal by the Supreme Judicial Court. And then 1 year ago, this very week, this body passed a revision of the Boston Trust Act, sort of a Boston Trust Act 2.0, in response to reports that Boston police officers had collaborated with ICE in a very harmful way with an employee of a company who was being retaliated against. And this body took it upon itself to talk about, you know, the Trump era attacks and what the city could do better, and revised it to a Boston Trust Act 2.0. Now that was also leaps and bounds beyond 1.0, but it left a few things out. The places where it did go forward were that, for example, police will now not ask about immigration status of anyone, including survivors of crimes, domestic violence. These are very powerful statements. We've heard that the police didn't do that, but it's important for that to be codified. Police will not perform the functions of an immigration officer. We've heard about how it does limit the information sharing by other agencies, including, you know, the school. But it left a few very important things out, and I would encourage this body to think about a Boston Trust Act 3.0 next year under a Biden administration, continuing to grow upon the progress that we've already made. And the things that I think are important to highlight that are still missing are that, unfortunately, some data sharing can still happen, especially through task forces and through places like the BRIC, the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. Unfortunately, what happened in the Paz Flores case that was really the impetus to the Trust Act 2.0 can still happen today. The language does not completely prohibit an officer from sharing information with ICE. There are some limits to it, but because it is not complete, that same situation could actually happen one more time, again, under the Trust Act 2.0. And then there are a few other areas that I think also need to be tightened up about how we work with these task forces, about why the ordinance allows the police to investigate a federal statute that makes it a crime to re-enter the United States after being deported. That's not something that we want our Boston police officers to be doing. That is written into the Trust Act, and we think it really should go. And so I would just encourage the city to take a look at revising it even further, to building on that progress, to continuing to live up to the promise of being a safe and welcoming city for immigrants. And I just want to thank all the counselors, and Councilor Mejia especially, for having us here for this discussion today.
Thank you. I'm so excited because we're gonna work on all of this. Just so you know, Laura, we're gonna do a 3.0. This sounds really exciting. And I know that UCF and the administration, you guys are gonna be so enthusiastic about this work because I know it's gonna create the type of environment that we are all yearning for our residents. So really excited about this work. I am going to now, we have one more speaker, and then I promise my colleagues we're gonna go into questions, but we're ending with what I believe is the future, which is young people. Valeria, You now have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your patience.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Valeria. I'm the lead coordinator of the Student Immigrant Movement. We are the only immigrant-led, youth-led organization here in Massachusetts, and we're based in Boston. We have young people across Massachusetts in schools, in high school and colleges. We work with them on leadership development. We believe that we should engage, recruit, and politicize young people so that they can become change makers in their communities. And that's precisely what our members do. And so one of the major things that we focus on is one-to-one peer mentoring. As immigrants ourselves, we help others come into their identities as undocumented folks, as DACA folks, TPS, refugees, all sorts of different statuses, and navigating those different statuses within education, their daily lives, and even with their families and the obstacles that their families face, whether it's around housing or healthcare, whatever it may be. And so we usually serve as a place of reference for them in terms of resources. We also focus on our college access program, which helps young people go to get a higher education. This has been a key part of SIM's identity, including the ways in which we have led in becoming undocumented and unafraid, meaning that we have been the first pioneer, both here locally, but also across the nation, what it means to come out and speak our story, speak our truth publicly, without voiceovers, without covering our faces, and really talking to what are the issues that we're experiencing, because we know best, right, what we are experiencing. And so with the higher college access, we take young people who usually are told that they cannot go to college, that they cannot obtain a degree either by counselors or educators, and we talk them through the process. We also just have different sub-programs that explore the different identities that immigrants are facing, right? We're not just immigrants, but we're also women. We're also people of color. We're also, you know, poor people, middle class, working class. And so there are various issues that we're facing with that identity of being immigrant. So that's a little bit about our work. I mean, we usually hear about the issues going on in the city and statewide from our members, right, or ourselves. I think a lot of the folks here today who we've been given the opportunity to work with have spoken really well on those issues and what that is. And so I would just say, I think some of the other things that we don't really talk about is that when we use language, when we claim to be immigrant friendly and we say, you know, regardless of status, we don't always mean regardless of status. I think a lot of the programs, a lot of the efforts actually don't include enough undocumented folks. We use regardless of status as a way of actually only serving the bare minimum for those who actually have some status, because we don't even give them the full of what we need to. And then we completely leave undocumented folks out. And so that happens a lot. And it's why we see the issues that we are seeing that a lot of my colleagues have brought up already. And also, I think we have to just learn that in order for these things to no longer happen, we actually have to institutionalize what it means to be immigrant friendly. It's not enough for us to speak on. We actually have to make policies that speak to that. We actually have to practice those policies. So it's not enough for our city leaders to get up and say that they're immigrant friendly, say we're a city of immigrants, but then turn around and there's a bunch of incidents taking place that actually are the reverse of that. It's also not enough to claim that we're representative of the population to get here and claim, you know, yes, I'm also a DACA person. Yes, you know, my mom is undocumented. My sister is a DACA person. You know, we have a lot to lose. When I get here and I say I'm undocumented or I'm a DACA person, I have a lot to lose. And so I don't think I think a lot of folks come up lightly saying, you know, oh, I was a child of immigrants. Oh, I'm an immigrant. And yes, that may be true. And yes, that experience is extremely relevant and it impacts, you know, everyone's lives in different ways when they are an immigrant.
but it's a different reality when that precise existence doesn't impact you in the same way anymore. So I think, even myself, I have privileges as a DACA person that I have never faced detention myself. I have never faced a parent being detained, thankfully, yet that has not happened. I hope it never happens. If it did ever happen, I would hope that I can actually take my mom to City Hall and just keep her there. Hopefully we won't be thrown out if she is in the process of being deported. But in any case, I think I just say that because there are people who actually have gone through that, and it's not to say that others aren't experiencing other things that are difficult, like, the various things I have already mentioned, but it's just to say that it's a difference of reality that I think we're not actually being inclusive. We're not actually having an inclusive conversation about what all those different realities look like. As a white Latina, a woman, I'm not being put in the gang database. I don't know, maybe I am. There's no way for us to check that. But as far as I know, I'm not likely, right? It's usually young men, young boys, right? That are facing that. And so we need to have all those different conversations about how are the young immigrant women being impacted. From my perspective, the way that happens is when I was sexually assaulted, it was difficult for my family to come forward to the police. And so thankfully, eventually we did after a while, because we were extremely scared. And there were various ways in which, we were helped, but there were also various ways in which we weren't helped afterwards. And so we also need to have those conversations about the lack of process and what's working and what's not working, and actually listen and take action, right? So I'll stop there. I know we have a lot of questions that are going to come up, but that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing your full self to this conversation. I think that you struck a chord for me. In terms of the privileges that we often take for granted. I've shared this publicly in the past, so this is not a big deal, but when I was a teenager, I tried to commit suicide. And at the time, my mom was undocumented, and she was so afraid that if she brought me to the hospital, that they were gonna take me away from her. And because she was undocumented, she was afraid. And those are the privileges that we often forget, and the fear that so many people who are undocumented in the city are living with every day. So I really do appreciate you being so honest and so forthcoming with your story. And I think it's important for us to recognize how many other people right now in the city of Boston are not getting the services that they need or are living in fear. And that is why we're having this hearing. And it's not political. And this is one thing, I know we're politicians, but we can't politicize this conversation. We have to ground it in what is right. And I think that sometimes doing what is right may be difficult, but is what it is required of these times. So I'm really hoping that this 3.0 version is something that we can all lean into. So thank you, Valeria, for sharing your story and for bringing us along your journey. I am going to ask my colleagues in the order of arrival for questions. And I know that Council President Janey has done a lot of work around her ordinance around information sharing. And I think a lot of the things that we heard here today really speak to that. So Councilor Janey, if you're still with us, would love for you to have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to chime in again to extend my gratitude to you and to the panel for sharing very powerful stories. You're right, the ordinance that we have on oversight and information sharing would go a long way to make sure that we truly have safe spaces and sanctuary spaces in our city. And we hope to continue to work with you, my colleagues, the advocates, the administration, and getting that ordinance passed. I just want to say thank you again. I will have to sign off and look forward to catching up on any next steps in terms of action. Thank you for your leadership in this space, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I'm gonna go next to, in the order of arrival, I'm gonna go next to Councillor Flynn. You now have the floor for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and I was really impressed listening to the panelists present their opening statements. So thank you for the incredible work they're all doing. I especially enjoyed listening to, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, Valeria. So one of the things I respect from your presentation is when you highlighted the struggles of immigrants, but you also highlighted that immigrants are also, many of them are also women of color, and they're also, many of them dealing with language challenges, discrimination, hiring, employment practices, access to healthcare, social services. And I've worked closely with Councilor Mejia on language access and cultural sensitivity related issues. And one of the first meetings I had 3 years ago was with the Asian Task Force Against Domestic Violence. And I asked the executive director, what is the major challenge that you face? And she said, language access. And a lot of immigrants coming forward, not coming forward rather, on domestic violence issues because of their immigration status, sometimes because language challenges as well. But I just wanted to highlight what your comments were, but I guess my question is to Yusuf. Can you just talk a little about the outreach you're doing on domestic violence in the immigrant communities? It's a problem certainly in many immigrant communities. As we talked about, many people are reluctant to go to the police or some other related issues, but I know Boston Police and in your office especially has done a lot of work on that. Can you just go over that for us a little bit?
Thanks so much, Counselor. And what I'll just say is that it's a major issue, particularly during the pandemic with COVID. And you know, I just, my heart goes out, really does, for so many of the spouses, particularly women, who are in such difficult positions now. Counselor, in full candor, our Office for Women's Advancement is the one that leads on the domestic violence piece. So I would suggest that the council direct the questions, you know, there. But it's an important issue. Our office wants to be hearing about it. And if there are stories, we as an office are absolutely committed to moving on that piece and supporting our residents there.
Thank you, Yusuf, and had an opportunity to have a hearing with Councilor Campbell, and one of the issues that was on domestic violence, including domestic violence in the immigrant communities. And I hope we're able to continue that. Sure we will next year, but I know language access is a critical part of that as well. Just want to open it up to any of the other panelists about language related issues on domestic violence situations.
I would just echo from my experience with clients that language access is a big issue for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, not only with the reporting, but also with the court process. As an attorney, even though I'm not representing that client as a victim witness, I've often had to offer to serve as translator with victim witness offices just so that my client can be in good communication about the process. And so just want to highlight and echo that those are concerns, and I'm glad that they're being worked on. And then also there is sometimes the issue in particular when an officer is called out for a quote unquote domestic dispute, if in particular, if the abuser is an English speaker, and the person who is the survivor of domestic violence is not. I have found instances where either my client was arrested even though they were the victim of the assault, or that there were dual arrests because the perpetrator is saying, they speak English, so they're speaking on behalf of the victim as well as themselves. So I just want to highlight those few examples that I've seen kind of come up repeatedly in those areas.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Emily, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. I'm going to move on to, I believe, if Councilor Wu, I'm going back to the gallery to see if Councilor Wu is still with us. I also want to acknowledge that Councilor Bach has joined us. So welcome, Councilor Bach. We're in the process of taking questions. Not sure if you want to quickly, I know we're going to lose our some of our panelists at 6. So I wanted to just, if you wanted to just say very brief remarks and hellos.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am really just here because it's such an important topic, and I know it was your maiden speech back in those long ago days, just at the beginning of this year when we started on the council. So I wanted to come here and join you, but I obviously am late, and so I don't want to cause repetition. So I'll just be listening and not bring questions to bear so I don't make anyone repeat themselves. But I just see on the call so many people who are doing important work in the city. I mean, Yusufi and Moya, and just I think this is something where there's a whole network of folks who make safe spaces possible, and it goes way beyond city government. But I do think it's an area that we have to lead in. And I'm really grateful for your leadership on this. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like, when you have a birthday party and all your friends show up to it, that's how I feel. Having my council colleagues here to participate means the world to me. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to Councilor Campbell. Let me go back to the order of arrival. I don't want to get anyone upset. So Councilor Breeden, you were next, and then I'm going to go to Councilor Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for sharing your experience and that those of the folks that you work with. One area I was very concerned about, families afraid to report domestic violence. I think we've already touched on that. The other area of concern is that when cases get to court, that are we still seeing ICE officers? I know court has been pretty much suspended with COVID, but is that still an issue of ICE officers turning up in court and making it so that witnesses and victims are afraid to turn up for court? Is that still happening? Or I know court is sort of not happening, but if court was happening, would that still be a concern? COVID has thrown a wrench in everything for me, so I can't really get things straight today. You get the question, I think.
Councillor Mejia and Councillor Breeden, may I respond?
Of course, this is a conversation. Please do.
Thank you, councillors. So Councillor Breeden, I very much appreciate your question. At Lawyers for Civil Rights, we filed the lawsuit that secured the injunction blocking immigration arrests in Massachusetts courthouses. That case remains on appeal to the First Circuit, the Federal Court of Appeals that covers New England. And so it remains under litigation and appeal. One important point here is that since courthouses have significantly diminished their in-person hearings and activities, we have not received any report of immigration arrests taking place in courthouses. We have been in close communication with our community partners, such as the Chelsea Collaborative and Centro Presente, among others, and they do not report any of their members being affected by this practice. Nevertheless, we continue to monitor this space, and we have already started dialogue with the Biden-Harris transition team, focusing on ensuring that under the Biden administration, that the definition of sensitive locations where immigration enforcement is not permitted encompasses not just schools, churches, and hospitals, but courthouses as well, precisely because of the impact on victims and witnesses that you identified. So this practice, although the federal government under the Trump administration may theoretically continue to be espoused to this, we expect a change under the Biden administration. And from a practical perspective, there has not been activity.
That's good to know. Thank you. And I'd also add to your list of sensitive spaces, I'm sure it maybe comes in under the umbrella of healthcare facilities, but community health centers, obviously, that are tremendous providers of care for our immigrant community. So that should be there on the list as well, I hope. Thank you.
Yeah.
Certainly, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, yeah, so obviously Ivan covered a lot of it, but we do know that there is still ICE doing operations, running rounds in Boston. Only 3 weeks ago, a Guatemalan man was arrested in a East Boston park. It's unclear what he did or if he's being charged for anything otherwise, but that is taking place. So that means that ICE is in the city and still conducting business as usual, as they usually do. So that is something to be aware of.
The other concern I've heard is that ICE officers are following children home from schools, and as a and again, that's a very not a very pleasant thing to be thinking about, and rather sinister in its nature. So again, thank you so much for your work. I really appreciate your leadership, and thank you for being here today. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Breeden.
Madam Chair, may I add something on that question?
Absolutely. And then I know Councilor Campbell has been patiently waiting, and Councilor Campbell, you are up next.
Oh, no problem. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly on the court arrest issue. I just want to congratulate, of course, Yvonne and the Lawyers Committee on their groundbreaking work on that. That was really sort of the first in the nation to do that. And just to highlight that while we were not seeing arrests in Massachusetts, thanks to the injunction in that case, we were seeing them right across the border in New Hampshire and Connecticut. So it did have a very important impact here. But, we don't know, obviously, where that case is going to end up and where the Biden administration is going to be. But, without those legal protections, they can still do that, right? So we do need to be very vigilant.
Madam Chair, I also think that when something happens across the border in New Hampshire, not that far away, then the chilling effect on the community here is impacted. So even though it might not be happening here, the fact that it's happening not that far away has a chilling effect on the community as well. So it instills fear and distrust in the system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify one thing for the public, which is—
What are all y'all trying to take over? I'm the mob. Go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. I know all of us are so familiar with these issues, but I do want to clarify for the public that's watching that the courts are not under the purview of the city of Boston, just so that everyone is clear on that. And then I do also want to just confirm one thing, that we all saw the high profile incident that Valeria mentioned, and I did confirm with BPD that they were not involved in that in any way.
So, okay. Thank you for that clarification. We cannot confirm nor deny. I just think that there is a lot of mistrust in the community, and I think that I do appreciate the clarity, and I think it's important for people to be informed as to the role that our officers did or did not play in that. So thank you for that clarification. I'm really excited to hear from Councilor Campbell, because she does a lot of work around the trauma space. And I know that when I think about this particular issue, I think about the trauma that so many of us are carrying as it relates to this issue. And so I'm hoping that some of your insight will lead us in that conversation, Councilor Campbell.
I take care of my own trauma. You know, we get the cases, we get the calls, it's painful. And so self-care is critically important too. And at times it involves family members or people we know and love. And for me, it's all about seeing the humanity in people, including those who are incarcerated, of course, right? Which is all near and dear. It's all connected, these pipelines, as Laura was talking about. So I just want to thank everyone from the administration, of course, as well as those from the community-based organizations for the work you're doing. It is not easy work. And I've been in communication with many of you, specifically with respect to the BRIC, the gang database, BPD. That work is ongoing and it is still immediate. And so we will continue that because it's a big piece of this work, even though there are sometimes separated and siloed conversations. So I just wanted to lift that up. I just have a few things. One starts with just, as we specifically talk about those who are undocumented, and I'm always thinking about things, of course, the city can do with the authority that we have. And one of the things I think is where we're missing the opportunity is to really talk about, you know, who are these individuals? You know, when we talk about those who are undocumented, they contribute though. There's sort of a narrative, I think, out there in the public or in the community as if those who do not have status yet don't contribute to the city of Boston. That they are just, you know, using our systems for some type of benefit, that they don't pay taxes, that they don't own businesses, that they don't work, right? So I do think there's an opportunity as we think about what steps we can take next, Councilor Mejia, some type of awareness campaign or something that is in your face. We know the data, we have the reports as to not just immigrants generally and what they contribute to the fabric of the city of Boston and have for generations, but those specifically that don't have a status yet, they also are contributing every single day and also on an economic front. And I often think that this city would come to its knees in many ways if these individuals were not a part of our economy, not a part of our city. So I think that's one missed opportunity that all of us could work together on in partnership. Because I often find myself in conversations with residents, including native Bostonians, talking about this very issue and reminding folks not only to see the humanity in everyone, but the contributions of this specific population of individuals. The second piece is, I guess, going more into my questions. And I think it gets at the 3.0, which of course I am happy to be a part of and to support you, Councilor Mejia, in what that might look like. You know, Councilor Zachem was here pushing for 2.0. I was council president then. It was not easy to get that done. It was hard. It was very difficult. There was a lot of pushback. We can talk about that. But the 3.0 I think is timely and overdue. So happy to continue conversations. But on the 3.0 piece, I guess I have two questions for the administration related to that. One is, what programs or benefits do we require or do we expect someone to sort of talk about their immigration status? Or are all our programs and benefits available to folks regardless of their immigration status? That's my first question, which goes back to, I think, Yvonne's point of making sure the programs and things we have available to people are available to residents regardless of how they identify in terms of their status. That's one. What currently are the prohibitions or the barriers? And then the second is, in what instances are we mandated as a city to work with ICE, to communicate with ICE? What departments? Who's required to do so? Those are my two sets of questions, which I think will inform what the 3.0 could look like.
Those are good questions. I'm going to go to Yusufi. I think you might be well positioned to answer that question in terms from the city. And then if anyone else has anything they would like to contribute, just raise your blue hand or your physical hand. But Yusufi, I'm going to go to you.
Councilor Campbell, the only programs that we have with immigration immigration eligibility restrictions are ones with state or federal requirements. During the COVID-19 crisis, we've unveiled a number of different programs that are actually open to anyone regardless of status. And in fact, I would argue really prioritize. So a good example of that for the public is the Rental Relief Fund, which basically is for residents that do not qualify for any federal benefits. So it's a real testament to the mayor for prioritizing that. And so that's number one. Another piece is we've used the Boston Resiliency Fund, as you know, and really on the website, it's very clear that it targets the population that does not qualify for benefits either. And we've distributed $28 million worth of money. A good portion of that has gone to our immigrant serving nonprofits. Also, my particular office helped facilitate the building of the Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative, COVID-19 Collaborative, that we as the Resiliency Fund put $650,000 as seed money. And now they've raised up to over $4 million that's gone into the hands of many of the folks that we're really talking about here today. And that has been the lifeline for folks during this time. So, and the Dreamers Fellowship Program, the pilot fellowships program that we started in the summer, targeted exactly that population. And I'm happy to share, by the way, that we're exploring with the Health and Human Services Cabinet a second pilot for that, and are exploring how do we make the summer program more equitable in that way. So those are.
I'll just quickly, I know at some point I might get the gavel to wrap up. So I will say, and I want to give kudos not just to the mayor, but to the counselors too, right? Whether it's the Rental Relief Fund and other programs where counselors were on, the COVID-19 calls, asking about specific populations of people, making language access available, very collaborative and powerful collaboration, right? And effective. But I would love to know, if we don't know right now, and maybe the answer is zero, if there are any programs that don't involve state or federal restrictions where there is a status restriction that we could change on our end. That would be helpful to know. And if the answer is no, we're good, wonderful. And then of course, it's a separate question on what we do with state and federal folks with respect to those program restrictions.
I'll look into it absolutely further, but my understanding is that's the case, but we'll certainly look into it more because my team is telling me that's the case.
Okay.
So, and then, yeah.
Then my second question.
Is there a second question? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, my second question was on where we mandated to communicate and talk to ICE and not just, so I'm gonna leave that question, that's it.
So the Trust Act, I do want to go over that, and I know that's been, we've been having a conversation, so, and I think just for the public's clarity as well. So as you know, Councilor, the Trust Act was passed unanimously in 2014, which the mayor signed into law, and then 2019 it was strengthened further by the council and the mayor. And what the Trust Act is trying to do is trying to make sure Boston is a safe and welcoming city for all by defining the roles and responsibilities of Boston Police from those of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And it means Boston police officers are all trained to not ask individuals about their immigration status, not share information with ICE, not make arrests based solely on ICE administrative warrants, not perform the functions of federal immigration officers, and not transfer an individual to ICE custody. An important distinction that the updated Trust Act makes is between ICE's two main divisions, and this is going to get right to your question, Councilor. The enforcement the two divisions are the Enforcement and Removal Operations Division, ICE ERO, and the Homeland Security Investigative Division, ICE HSI. The Boston Police Department will not work with either division solely for civil immigration enforcement purposes. Where we will continue to work with ICE HSI is with the ICE HSI division on matters of significant public safety importance, such as human trafficking, child exploitation, drugs and weapons trafficking, and cyber crimes. What I will say is that I'm proud to say that the Trust Act was a collaborative effort among the mayor, the city council, BPD, and community advocates, and a clear example of the value of working together for the common good. And when we all realized that it could be further strengthened, we took that step again together as a city. So I hope that clarifies, and answers your question, Councilor.
I would like to give Laura an opportunity to chime in on this, to provide some input. I'm going to let you live a little bit longer, Councilor Campbell, since you waited so long. So, and I do have my own questions, y'all, so don't think that we're done. So go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. And I do see Valeria's hand as well. Just on the question of a mandate, and I think that's a really important framing and question. In terms of a legal mandate, there is no legal mandate to collaborate with ICE, nor can there be, because under the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, what is known as the Anti-Commandeering Amendment, the federal government cannot commandeer the resources of a city to do federal work. And so any time that the federal government has tried to force cities to do that kind of work, whether it was around, gun background checks or the Affordable Care Act or immigration, those have been struck down over and over again, because you simply cannot, as the federal government, force a city to do anything on behalf of the federal government, right? You can't have a city do the work of the federal government. So anything that the city of Boston does is legally voluntary. There is some data sharing that happens automatically, which is not to say that it is legally mandated, but under secure communities, anytime that a person is arrested in the city of Boston and fingerprinted, that information does go automatically to ICE. And it's something that needs to be dismantled at the federal level. It's a little bit harder and trickier for any city to opt out, because it would mean opting out of sort of the federal databases where you get information about arrests, right? It's trickier, but it doesn't mean it can't be done legally. Everything else, inputting information from a Boston student into the BRIC is done voluntarily. Having the BRIC be accessible to ICE is done voluntarily. And those are things that we could shut off at the city level.
Wow.
Very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that question, because I feel like we don't ask it that way many times.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit, as you can imagine, and you guys know. So Valeria, if you want to go, and then I'm all set, Councilor Mejia.
Oh, so you're facilitating now? I'm the chair of this. You okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
I saw her doing this.
I have questions too. Go ahead.
She's like, Sam, you guys stop. I'm taking it.
Okay, y'all are too much. I'm the chair.
No more questions. This is my last one. Thank you so much.
I'll be brief because, like you mentioned, you guys are covering a lot of the student stuff. I just want to say, in terms of all of the efforts that have been done by the city of Boston and a lot by your office, you, Sophia, as well, I don't want to discredit any of that amazing work. However, there are big barriers that I wanted to speak to. Your question was around, how are the impacted communities having accessibility, how they're undocumented and temporary status folks, right, receiving these funds. And I want to just flag that immediately in the application process, there's a lot of barriers already that have, and there's a lot of ways that people may actually, who need that assistance, not get it. So I actually didn't want to get it wrong. So I'm here on the website. I actually wish that one of the things that I think we can strengthen is that when these application processes are created, that community organizations like mine are asked about the application process and how does it look? How do the questions look? Because some of these are like, are you a city of Boston resident? And when you use that language, people get triggered. They're like, oh, I'm not a resident, I'm undocumented. Or also, it has a section where it says, you are subject to verifying eligibility, which includes photo identification of head of household, copy of signed lease or tenant agreement, documentation of unemployment benefits. None of these things are things that undocumented folks or some other immigrants are going to have accessibility to. A lot of them don't sign lease agreements. A lot of them don't have receipts at times about their rent payments. a lot of times they don't want to share identification photos or anything of that sort. They don't have documentation that they can share with the photo identification. As well as information about income. It can be very tricky. Yes, a lot of folks do file taxes. It's one of the things that we try to teach a lot of folks is about, you can file your taxes, even with an IT number, right, a taxpayer number, but not everyone does that. And so, it can be very tricky. And these are the things that I wish, folks really honed in on, because it's not enough to say it's open to everyone, but then the application process is already not accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Councilor Mejia. That was very helpful. So I look forward to continuing this conversation with you, of course, and thank all of you for the work you're doing. Stay safe and healthy, but looking forward to continuing to push it forward. We'll be in touch with your office. And thank you, Councilor Mejia, again for hosting this conversation.
Thank you for joining us. I feel like a lot of these questions really helped us actually move the conversation into a different direction. I know there's a lot of legalities and there's a lot of things in terms of creating safe sanctuary spaces, but even the language and how our people experience city services is part of that feeling safe. So I'm glad that we're having it, and thank you so much for bringing it. So I do have a few questions, y'all, don't worry. We're going to keep things moving. I'm curious, Yusufi, I'm hoping that you can shine some light on how the city is working with the country and with the state to work towards expanding protections for undocumented residents. And I'm also curious, we heard in the BPD's letter that they have been working closely with you. Can you please talk a little bit about what that collaboration looks like? County, sorry. I'm just excited because we're going to have a new administration. So, but I meant county.
Thanks for that question, Counselor. So at the state level, particularly on this issue, the mayor has been an advocate for the Safe Communities Act, right, which would essentially be a legislation similar to the Trust Act. In fact, the Trust Act is stronger than the Safe Communities Act, at least the current versions of it that are there. So that's one piece we've been doing. The driver's license bill, we've been a huge advocate for. The mayor wrote an op-ed just earlier this year on it. And as we all know, the mayor was among the first sponsors of that bill. And so it's a bill that we really hope gets passed. At the federal level, insofar as with the topic at hand, because we're, as you can imagine, advocating on a whole host of different topics, from food to evictions and we're doing that in the state as well. So, the things, but insofar as this is concerned, what I'll just say is that since 2011, ICE has had a sensitive locations policy on not conducting enforcement at houses of worship, schools, hospitals, the site of weddings, funerals, or other public religious ceremonies, and at the site of a public demonstration. And so the mayor will advocate with the incoming Biden administration, just like Yvonne and Lawyers for Civil Rights are. Thank you for your advocacy on that, to further strengthen and clarify what this policy covers and to increase transparency and accountability about compliance. What I will also say is I think, the mayor generally feels there's could be a lot more transparency and accountability generally in our immigration system. And that's why we started the Greater Boston Immigrant Legal Defense Fund. Frankly, the mayor learned about it, came back really hot from a U.S. Mayor's Conference after learning about it, and launched the Greater Boston Immigrant Legal Defense Fund. We're the first New England city to contribute public dollars to that. We'd love if other cities stepped up to the plate, and so did so did the state, because there are state funds out there. So those are some of the ways that we're advocating on that piece. In terms of collaboration with BPD, it depends on kind of the situation, but it can range from helping constituents navigate particular issues with BPD. Just a couple of, one thing I'll say is that the mayor just has approved the position for us to hire a constituent services coordinator. So I'm really excited for that. And there's a conversation about a domestic violence piece. If we have a coordinator there, it's going to really help us do a lot more intake and help constituents kind of navigate city government. Go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah,
Councilor.
no, I'm just being mindful of time, just because I know we have 15 more minutes left, and I do have another question that I wanted to get in there. If that's okay.
Go ahead, please.
So I'm curious in regards to COVID in particular. We often say, and we say it proudly, that Boston is a city of immigrants, but COVID-19 has shown us in many ways how Boston can still be an inhospitable place for so many. And how would you say the status of being undocumented here has shaped their experiences of COVID-19? And I'm talking specifically around access to services, testing. I know that there even been some, even though it says free, sometimes people end up at some testing sites where they're asked for IDs, information, insurance. And so I'm just curious what the city has been doing in regards to COVID response and making sure that our undocumented loved ones are able to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, the fear is real, and what Valeria was speaking to is very, very real. That's the reality of it. We have been just working and persevering as hard as we can to break the trust gap there. Some examples of that is the Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative, which I talked about before, the Boston Resiliency Fund. And one thing I do want the body to know here is that we have given from the BRF grants to these organizations, and being very cognizant of exactly what Valeria said, do not ask for, have actually said to those immigrant organizations that please do this in a way that does not ask for identification. As if you talk to Ronnie Millar, Natalicia Tracy, Patti Montes, Nikki, you talk to these folks, and I can tell you their process of giving that money out for basic needs is a phenomenally equitable process. And we as on the city side said that's exactly what we want. And so we're so aware of that and are trying to work around the regulations where we can, Valeria. I think the challenge is that there's so many things that exist that make that really difficult. Beyond that, Councillor, we really work closely with our community partners. And throughout this crisis, we have held a number of community group gatherings from in East Boston and different parts of the neighborhoods with different immigrant groups. And also we do these webinars every 2 weeks where Yvonne has been on, I know ACLU has been on at different times, and others have, where we know that the trusted messengers are the Yvonnes, the Valerias, the Lauras of the world. And so what we are trying to do is almost in some ways put them in the front lines, because we know they're the ones that can get this information out in a better way than we can. So those are I would say some of the strategies that we've tried to employ. Lastly, I just do want to say this is that during as money has been running out at the federal level through the CARES Act, we have built a really solid immigrant food network in the city of Boston through Catalina, our mayor's office for immigrant advancement director. There is no other city that has this kind of food network, and the state just recently remarked to us that we need to replicate this model throughout. Again, this food network, immigrant food network, targets exactly the population that we're thinking about today.
Yeah, and don't forget, I was the one who helped you put that together.
Let me just say, partnerships with our counselors is always part of it.
The first one yelling at you about this situation, and I was going hard around food insecurity issues. So I'm so glad to see the program that has been created. So I would like to ask the same question, but now I would like to hear it from a resident perspective and just kind of for those who are working with our families. So this goes to the advocates in the room here, is how well do you feel city government has responded to the needs of immigrants living in Boston during COVID-19? What policies or programs have been most helpful? And how could the city be more responsive to the needs of our undocumented residents? Valeria. You have the floor.
I can go first. Be happy to. So, it's a complicated issue. It's like all the other things that we're talking about. Obviously, this is why we sometimes engage in back and forth, because it's such big stuff. But in terms of COVID, undocumented families have faced a lot of hardship. To Yusufi's point about, the way in which the city tries to work with partner organizations, it's really difficult because it does place a burden on us. And it's almost like we always wish that the city did more, so the burden's not on us to do certain things, like get the word out and explain to people, oh, no, actually, you can apply to it. Oh, no, actually, you do qualify, even though it says you don't, or even though it may seem like you don't. Or even just the process of trying to help people navigate with communicating with someone from the city to ensure that the process is done smoothly. It's a big burden. And, my organization, I think I can safely guess, has a much smaller budget than some of the city organizations. And so there's a lot of barriers. And I can tell you that, yes, when you give the money to the organizations to disperse, it causes a situation where, yes, we can disperse that money, but at a much smaller value for reasons that I can't go in depth here. Otherwise, we may not even be able to do it anymore. But it puts us in a situation where we can't actually give out that much money when we're required to create that process where people who don't get the funds can get it without XYZ, or so that it's, fiscally responsible, or whatever you want to call it. So I know we can maybe talk about this off the record some other time about why it is that this happens and how we can do a better job. But that's one thing. And then also, aside from the language issues, the navigation, the bureaucracy, the money, and its dispersion, as other folks mentioned, people go and they think that, COVID testing is not free. People do ask for insurance. Sometimes it's not even because they need the insurance. Sometimes it's just to be able to pull them up in the system in the hospital. And so again, I think just going back to my initial point, we need to be explicit. A lot of ways in which the community gets their information is from the news, from their local news, their language, right? And they also do a lot of misinformation. And so the way that we have to combat that is the city using the resources that they have to actually get that information out there. I know particularly from one issue that I saw was with the EBT cards. I think that's what they're called, that all the students received. I'm a college educated, I speak English. My mom asked me to do the call because my sister wasn't being able to do it. I had to do the call 20 times. I am not exaggerating. It is because part of it, the system was a little bit faulty. And the other part was that the information the system was giving, the automated system, was in contradiction with what was written on the paper. And so they were saying, if you don't have a social, use this, it was like your children's birthday or something like that. But it wasn't working out, and you had to do it in a certain amount of time and all of this. And so if I stressed with that and it took me that long to activate that card, I got an email from a foundation earlier that said, we have an issue. A lot of the EBT cards were not activated. People didn't use it. It's because of that. It's because it was so difficult to use the actual system. But also I can say call systems are very helpful, especially when they're in your language. So if the city can do that, I don't know if there's a way to do that, but if the city could do calling systems in people's languages where they just list out the different information, well explained, have places where they can get in that information that's not confusing, that the language is going to trigger them in a different direction, then that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Sam, don't think that I'm leaving you off the hook, Chief DePina. I'm saving the best question for last. Don't you think you're?
I'm waiting on you, Counselor.
No, I gotta ask you one question. Then I know that Counselor Bach is still with us, and I'm not sure if you're gonna have questions, but I'll go next to you, Counselor Bach. And then Emily, I haven't heard much from you, and I'd love for you to provide some perspective to this question as well. not to put you on the spot, but I would love to hear from you as well, okay?
Not to put you on the
this
spot, but
question
putting you on the spot.
Exactly, 'cause everybody has to speak up in here. So we've heard from countless young people about how they're concerned for their undocumented friends and students, particularly due to the presence of school police officers. And I'm wondering, how are we instructing police officers in anti-racist behavior about providing a safe space for undocumented students? Can you talk to me a little bit about what BPS is doing, Chief DePina? And then Emily, I would love to hear what are some of the things that you would recommend?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to first, I can't thank Chief Coakley Rice enough for all the work that she's done since she's been here since June, as far as really analyzing the department and understanding what the department's needs are, and really doubling down on our messages and our policies and our training around those policies. She's also done a great job at identifying much needed training for the officers regarding a lot of different areas and spaces, and this is one of them. So I'll turn it over to Chief Coakley Rice to just talk a little bit about the training and specifically around anti-racism lenses as well. But she's done a great job at working with her officers on that and making her officers keenly aware that it's important for them to engage in the community, work with the community, and be seen as an asset and a help and a resource instead of a position of fear or authority and that kind of thing. And I also just want to note that, under her leadership, we're also changing our school police officers' uniforms so they won't be in their typical uniforms. Those are still required, in the events of states of emergencies and, when duty calls, they have to wear those uniforms. For the most part, we're going to move to a different, softer uniform where they're going to have khakis and polos, but I'll let Chief Coakley Rice speak more to that and the training.
Yeah, and I think, just changing the uniform, but we also are hoping that with along change with those uniforms are also some policies, right? And how they show up. So can't change your clothes if you ain't gonna change your action.
Absolutely
so
right. Absolutely
just curious
right.
about what that looks like.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we totally agree. And I was always been a big fan of, they don't know if you change if you don't do something different. So we've been doing a few things different in the short 15 weeks that I've been there. But one main thing I think in coming in on my appointment is really to change in the policy and our information sharing. I've heard a lot of discussion here about that today. And again, I have to just commend you, Councilwoman Mejia, just for really bringing up this and really staying persistent on this, because it's very important, not only to your community, but to our community as well, and our students and the safety. And one of the objectives that I really managed when I came over here is thinking about, the safety and security of our young people is definitely extended to their information. And I take that wholeheartedly because I have an accountability not only to you and your constituents, but to my community. I'm a longstanding resident of Boston. I still live in Boston. And so what happens in Boston and to Boston students is very valuable to me. One of the things I can look at real quick is just our new policy that we're looking at. A policy regarding preparing shared student incident reports and information with BPD. We put a lot of time and effort into this, and we hold this very dear to us. It's an expression of our transparency and also of our accountability to the city of Boston as students. We restricted use of internal safety service reports. That's our general SSR1 reports, what our officers do. We've also restricted the types of student conduct for which safety service employees may prepare and file BPD 11 reports. We've also investigative reports may never contain certain information such as students' immigration status, their citizenship, the national origin, the ethnicity, the native and spoken language, or suspected gang affiliation, which is a total deviation from prior policies. We eliminate the practice of preparing intelligence reports. Safety service employees may inform student administrators prior to preparing an incident report. And it's not may, it will. Safety service employees will inform school administrators prior to preparing incident reports. School administrators must conduct affected students and their families, must contact them within 24 hours of receiving notification of a police report. monthly meetings with the superintendent to review safety service data. In addition, school safety working groups. We meet with the superintendent and review the data and the recommendations on that data at least every month. Annual.
I'm sorry, Chief Coakley-Rice, can you also speak to the training around restorative justice and the anti-racism training that
Yeah,
we're doing?
and also I just want you all to know that I know some of you all have to leave at 6, but can y'all stay a few minutes extra just so we can wrap things up?
Right now we have offices in a number of different trainings. We're planning to do a restorative justice training circle with BSAC, which is the Mayor's Council of Youth People. We're planning to do that right after the new year. We're in the planning stages now. We're going to have about 5 or 6 officers. I've had officers attend the training for homeless youth and how we can deal with them and the trauma related to a lot of them. We've also had officers train a trainer classes with the Municipal Police Training Council. We've also had 2 officers, no, matter of fact, we've had 10 officers training with ROCA and their CBT training. So we're just in the short time that I've been there, we've really been dedicated and committed to really getting out there and being a different and a more engaging department.
Thank you for that. And so I would love to just give Emily an opportunity to kind of we've been talking about this since I first stepped foot into City Council. And so I'm just curious in terms of hearing the progress and the work that is being done towards creating a safer space for our kids. Your reactions, your thoughts, and maybe additional recommendations that we need to consider.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity, and once again for your dedication to making this a top priority for you and continuing to bring these issues. And very grateful to the City Council and all the different departments who've been very supportive. And I've been very happy to be following along with the very strong coalition of folks and giving lots of credit to those who are leading, such as Sim and Laura's committee and Unafraid Educators and other groups, and really appreciate their work, and Boston Public Schools on their work. But I know that our coalition of folks representing students are seeking further refinement of those policies. And so I'd be remiss not to say that we would like to see continued work. I know there has been progress and we're very appreciative of that, but I know that there have been additional issues that we believe would benefit from more refinement. So I would also like to raise that it's great that there have been more trainings done, and I think that's wonderful. I will say that over the last few years as immigration advocates, we have tried to bring some trainings into some of the Boston Public Schools, and that has not always been well received. We haven't necessarily been given access, or there hasn't been interest shown in having that kind of training for either teachers or students, or just kind of opening up that dialogue. And I will also note, and this predates Yusufi, although I see that An is on the call, so he was around. We also attempted to have some training for the Boston Police Department on immigration issues, and that also was unfortunately very poorly received. And so those are areas where I think we could continue to move forward and make progress. So I do think that, Trust Act 2.0 and the work that has been done in terms of the SSR1s and things like that in the schools, those are all positive strides, but there's still work to be done. And, there's more to be done on those policies. Those are great places to start. And in terms of trainings and education, I think there's still room for us to do more.
Madam Chair, if I can respond briefly.
Sure.
I'd love to kind of get with you and or others that may have professional development materials that you think our officers can benefit from.
No.
And I'd love to be able to look at the material, go over the material too, and figure out a way how we can work with Chief Coakley-Rice and our team to at least start with our officers with some of that information and training. I welcome that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Because I will be gabbling you right now. I know. I sent you a text go. That's why I'm stop all this disruption with Sam talking out of turn. Go ahead. Say your final words, Yusufi. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council. Thank you so much for your leadership and holding this hearing, and again, continue to focus on this. And I really do want to thank of my colleagues in the school department. Chief Coakley, I look forward to meeting you. Actually, we haven't gotten a chance to meet yet, so I look forward to that. And I do really want to thank all the advocates from Yvonne, Laura, Valeria, to Emily, for their real work on day-to-day work, which is very hard. And I want to recognize that they have played a really important role in also moving the conversations on a whole host of different issues. And so thank you for what you are doing. I know it comes from Sam, myself, Chief, the mayor. All these conversations really help us move forward. Again, we may disagree at times, but it's part of us moving together. So thank you so much. Please forgive me, I have to jump off, and I look forward to continuing working with you all.
That's right. Thank you so much. I'm gonna ask Counselor
and Councilor Bach. She's awesome too.
That's right. Don't forget about her. And she's been here waiting. And I know she said that she didn't have any questions. She texted me to let me know that. But she's been so patiently waiting and just wanted to know if you wanted to just close out with some closing remarks or any other questions. And then I'm going to have my closing remarks and then y'all can go home. Okay. Councilor Bach.
No, thank you so much, Madam Chair. No, I've really appreciated the conversation, and because I had to come in late, I don't want to be repeating stuff that was at the beginning. So just I think this needs to be work that, isn't on the edges, but is in the center of everything that we do at the city. And I really appreciate you holding the hearing. So thank you. You're muted, Madam Chair.
Good job for a politician. You did good. Thank you. So I think in the interest of really appreciating everyone's time and honoring it, I'm going to recommend that this conversation, obviously because we're hosting this towards the end of our legislative cycle, is that what we're going to do is refile and pick it back up. And the hope is that to do what Laura recommended, 3.0 version. And the fact that the administration showed up and that everyone is here leaning into the conversation is very promising to me in terms of what we can do together. Because I do believe that everyone here has the best interest of all of our residents. And so I'm encouraged by the dialogue that we had here today and some of the great ideas that came of it. So really looking forward for us to taking Laura's, I'm going to coin it, Laura's 3.0 version of the Trust Act so that we can really restore the trust here in the city of Boston. And so let me go back to my scripts before I forget any formalities, because I know that there's certain things, and I'm probably frozen because my internet is really bad. So can you just hear me? Can someone just say yes, they can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so I'm going down to my script. I don't believe we have any testimonies. So I just want to thank again the members of the public, the panelists for their testimony. And just wanted to know if anyone had any closing remarks that they'd like to share, or if you guys are tired and done and ready to go home, you're welcome to do so. But if there's anything that you want to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. No? Great. I think we did a great job. And I am so incredibly grateful that I got to do my my maiden speech with you all. And thank you for your partnership the entire year. Helping us get to this point and looking forward to 2021 and making some things happen. And so I'm going back to my script so I can adjourn. So I'm drawing this hearing to a close. And thank you so very much. Everyone have a beautiful holiday. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Adios.
you.
Bye,
Thank
guys. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Good job.